Ah yes, the summer trip to Salem. Thank you for being patient with me while I put this much anticipated video together. So as many of you may be researching a trip to Salem know, and others may not, if you're looking at flying rather than driving, the most likely arrival airport option is Boston Logan International. This still puts you considerably outside Salem, Massachusetts by a 30 or 40 minute drive depending on traffic. However, the airport is located surprisingly close to local sites and attractions that are located right off Boston Harbor, which you fly over and land when you arrive at the airport. So the first question we had for this trip had to do with comparing flying Southwest and flying Delta first class. Price-wise, they're very close, with only a $20 difference. However, Chris felt the real value was in the legroom. Guys, you'll appreciate that extra bonus. Now, if you can fly in the main cabin comfortably, for Delta, it's $80 cheaper if legroom is not an issue. However, if you plan on traveling with multiple bags at $45 a check bag, first class pays for both your check bags, a carry-on, a personal item, which Southwest can't compete with. So if you plan on going through the airport laden down like an African swallow with luggage, then flying first class is going to be your thing. Second, and I have to bring up the second important budgeting point, was Ubers, rentals versus staying in downtown Salem. Now, as many of you know, I'm a sucker for a hot tub. After an 8 to 12 hour day, a long hot soak is just the thing I want. However, you will find that there are virtually no hotels in Salem that offer such amenities. That being the case, I opted to book at Spring Hill Suites in Peabody. Unfortunately, the hot tub and pool were down for refurbishment. This is important because the other factor in determining a hotel was the cost. Each night's stay was $20 to $40 more at hotels in Salem, which did not feature hot tubs, so it seemed sensible to book one in Peabody and pay the difference and then Ubering back and forth. However, without the hot tub making it worth it, we spent over $500 in Uber fees traveling to and from the airport and back and forth into Salem each day during our trip. Peak time for Ubers is around 10 p.m. This is after all the shops and the restaurants are closed and all the tours have concluded, so you will pay a premium rate on Ubers after 10 o'clock at night. If your other option is renting a car, let me tell you, we found out day one why they are called mass holes. Massachusetts drivers treat traffic laws like an option and a suggestion. On more than one occasion, we found our driver navigating traffic that we would not seen coming and gotten either lost or in an accident. On top of that, you'll pay $100 a day with a car and still have to pay an additional $20 in parking, so in that factor, you're really not saving money that way either. Now let's talk about getting your bearings, because this is important. Yes, people, it's map time! If getting dropped off by an Uber, just have them drop you off at Rockefeller's or by the Hawthorne Hotel on the opposite end of Essex. You will have easy access to almost everything we're going to go over, with the exception of Fort Pickering and Dead Horse Beach. From Rockefeller's, it's a 9-minute walk to the wharf, 7 minutes to the Salem Witch Museum, a 14-minute walk to the House of Seven Gables, and honestly, if you're going to want to take it easy on your feet, head up Essex Street and book a ticket for the trolley, and then take that trolley to all the places for just over $20. For those who have done a bit of research and have checked out Derek's channel Detours and know of Rockefeller's, you probably think it's just a bar. Located in the historic Daniel and Lowe Company building, this historic site was the home of famed jeweler and silver and goldsmith Daniel Lowe. Its walk-in safe is but one room off the main dining room. Today, however, it hosts a positively delightful restaurant with exceptional food and a centralized location for all your Salem-y goodness. Just up the old cobble-peg allotment of Essex Street from Rockefeller's, dedicated to pedestrian traffic, you'll find a variety of shops, catering to both a devout practitioner of the pagan arts as well as coffee houses, jewelers, and tourist shops, with fun t-shirts and souvenirs to take home and show off to your friends. However, down these ancient pathways, you'll also find gateways to intrigue and horror, presented to you as local guided tours designed to educate, entertain, and horrify. Walking tours are a staple in this historic town, and there's no shortage of options when it comes to choosing one. From Salem's historic 1692 and witch trial tours to hocus pocus, pop culture, and ghost tours, Salem boasts over 72 different walking tours from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Most places booked can be found along Essex Street or booked online. Our first day, we attended an unplanned tour with a Dr. Mike Vitka on his Spellbound tour, which was a wonderful, well-balanced walking tour covering enough history to give you the backstory, enough haunt to make you look over your shoulder, and enough drama to make you want to come back for more. Mike was very open to discussing not only hauntings in Salem, but is part of a local paranormal investigators group, and will happily talk to you about your own personal experiences, as well as some really good evidence covering the hauntings in his tour. On the flip and absolutely polar opposite, we have Ghost City Tours, which was a rollover booking from Tombstone. Man, I hope this whole company isn't this bad, because this was by far the worst tour I have ever taken. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Of the 17 locations advertised we were allowable to go on, and we knew most likely we would not be going out to Proctor's Ledge or the House of Seven Gables because it was too far out of the way. We hoped to at least get some good history, not too many repeats from Mike's tour, as well as some good ghost stories. Bonus if we got evidence or an EVP. What we got was a tour guide who was the second last to show. Used the F word as a comma, a random assortment of facts peppered with swearing, and a guide who didn't care where his group stood in relation to the street, or allowing traffic, be it pedestrian or vehicular, to pass, in a clear contempt for Salem's history and anything that had to do with what us as consumers paid for. Our tour guide spent so much time embellishing his stories that he rambled incoherently, making it hard to follow. His abuse of language was so obtuse that the second stop, I didn't want to listen anymore, and after the third, both of us just wanted to leave. Other members of the group were so put out that they left scathing reviews of his job within 1 hour of enjoying his tour. While I normally focus on wildlife photography, Salem has an abundance of opportunities for some really nice evening and street photography.
I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I've changed for the better this time. I thought I would never be fine. I strive just to say I'm alright, and for the first time in a long time I'm alright. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays.
Now with all that walking around and sightseeing, you're bound to get hungry, and I observed there was not a whole lot of places that did food reviews for Salem, so here we go with our top picks, and 2 that I would say need some improvement, or yeah, avoid this altogether. Welcome to my watched way too many episodes of the DFB guide for my own good, and I'm sorry if you're probably going to get hungry watching this. Boston Burger Company is just down Washington Street from Rockefeller's and has some pretty tasty sandwiches inside. While not as quite as good as Milwaukee Burger Company, we suspect they may be the same parent company. I'll give it a good 7.5 out of 10. Rockefeller's. What can I say? Derek does not give this place enough credit. Generous portions made with great flavor and texture, and not skipping on the ingredients. The atmosphere inside is just formal enough for a night out, while the patio gives that casual vibes of a night with friends. On the first night, due to time constraints, we just had the spinach and artichoke dip, and on the second night we enjoyed a haddock plate and clam chowder, which was served in a bread bowl. Dude, 9 out of 10. Must do again. Red Sandwich Shop. Now this one came highly recommended and delivered on that promise. Being one of the oldest coffee shops in the country, Red delivers on the goods. Great coffee, huge portions, and some of the best waitstaff we had the entire time we were in Massachusetts. The biscuits and gravy were an old take, with the gravy bearing the consistency of a sausage paste rather than the more fluid Midwestern gravy. The second visit had a hash plate, and this was a wonderful plate of lox that I couldn't even finish in one sitting. Red's is a breakfast-only place and is closed by 3, so to be sure to get there in time. 10 out of 10. Jaho Coffee. Now, if you find yourself down by the wharf, feel free to check out Jaho. This little coffee and wine bar is just off Derby Street and offers some tasty homemade snacks and a pretty decent cup of joe, so you can sit and relax while down by the water. If it's later in the afternoon, there are a variety of more adult beverage to partake of while you take a break from exploring Salem's historic waterfront and wharf area. Jaho was not particularly expensive for what you get, but loses a good deal of points in not being able to cater to people with special dietary needs or food allergies. You won't find oats, soy, or almond milk for your coffee, and that cake that looks so tasty in the display case may have nuts, so please ask before partaking in some of these tasty treats. The next two on the list are places I would say you would definitely to avoid altogether, or accept the fact that there are just better places out there. Fountain Place Restaurant. Just across Essex Street from Rockefeller's is a conveniently located breakfast stop that looks like it has all the right moves. The people watching is great, the interior is passable, however the food was lackluster in comparison to Red's, and the service, well, left a little bit to be desired. While the portions were big enough to fill our stomachs, the prices sat about as well as their insipid flavor. The menu and food was reminiscent more of a truck stop than a Main Street cafe, which is a shame, as they had so much more going for them, including patio dining, which we may have used had the weather been warmer. This place may be good for a $3 cup of coffee, but I would definitely look elsewhere for some more flavorful dining options. 3 out of 10, better look elsewhere next time. Then there's this place. Wow. Just wow. I have only on one other occasion been so put out with a place that I merely ordered a drink before deciding to leave. This hot hornet's nest of a restaurant has so much more room than the original Red's in Salem, which it's based off of. By the way, this particular location's in Peabody. Even carries the same menu. However, that's where the two places cease in their similarities. The waitstaff was curt to the point of being rude, the coffee was watered down and tasted horrible, and the atmosphere was more like a Golden Corral than the small friendly place we had dined in just the day before. And when we went to leave, the waitress told us that the original Red's we ate at yesterday was closed, and had been closed, and that we wouldn't be able to eat if we just left before stomping off with a huff. I don't mean to be super critical of anybody, but damn. Seriously, how do you screw up iced coffee? As you walk its granite and cobble-peg streets, you will find that Salem is an old New England town with a rich and often regarded tragic history. While most popularly known for their infamous witch trials, Salem pulls back its onion-like layers and reveals a seaside shipping and fishing community, not too unlike my local Port Washington and Sheboygan haunts. With both their economies being very similar in nature, it's easy for me to relax into other aspects of Salem's history, because admittedly, you get sick of hearing about the witch trials. While Salem has currently capitalized on that infamous era, you'll notice callbacks to Salem's distinguished shipping history. As many of the shops and restaurants, you can notice walk-in safes that would normally be reserved today for banks. However, as we were reminded, so I shall mention here, that at one point Salem was an international shipping hub, becoming one of the wealthiest cities per capita in the United States, with its maritime center hosting a variety of wharfs and docks spanning 1 mile of waterfront, including Salem's Custom House, Hawks House, Derby House, Rum Shop, and Forrester Warehouse, which now stands as a testament to Salem's greatness, not only as a shipping port, but as a shipyard and fishing model. These safes were not only keepers of money, but trade goods, including spices, teas, textiles, and silver. Nautical nerds and history buffs can appreciate America's influence on early trade that they had with the East India Trading Company in China in real life when stepping back into the history of the town. As an example of such minor note that while Nathaniel Hawthorne is a nationally treasured author, he also spent time working as a surveyor at the Salem Custom House before attaining fame for his literary prowess. While surveying brought in a paycheck, he found the work boring, and years were found devoid of the writings which would soon foreshadow his future greatness. A note that I bring up here because sometimes we wonder if the road we're on will take us to where we want to go. There are so many paths to go on, and they can all lead to the same destination. It's just how we choose to go, and sometimes we have lessons to learn along the way. Now, Salem has a dedicated art district that runs from Derby Street up to the back of the old town hall, used in the filming of Hocus Pocus. While there are a few studios there, we didn't actually see an art show going on, although there was a weekly farmers market in the square. When not in use, the square is home to several tables and chairs so that you may enjoy an afternoon meal or just relax. It's important to note now where your public bathrooms are, because almost all restaurants will require that you buy food in order to use their facilities if they have facilities available. And unless you're staying at a local hotel, you are certainly going to need some place to go. There are bathrooms available in the mall and in the art district, but I advise you plan your routes accordingly, especially if you have small children or digestive issues. For all the days that we went, we spent no less than 6 hours in town, and knowledge of those facilities became very handy. Now, as you're walking those historic streets, you can also take note of the poignant way that Salem has demarked its history tastefully, without throwing it in your face. Some of these may merely be plaques on houses, noting who built it, owned it, or the owner's profession. Others are more recent, main roads bearing street signs dedicated to soldiers who fought for our country. And as the birthplace of the National Guard, a tribute to the first muster lies within the Salem Commons, which used to be used as a training ground for the militia, and stands the Washington Arch, a tribute to George Washington's legacy. Salem takes its long and significant military history very seriously. While the town can take its history with a grain of salt or two, knowing its dark history and catering to the many fans of both fact and fiction that flock there each year, Salem as a community has grown past the childish preconceptions of an all wrong or all right ideology. Giving everyone a chance to speak, giving their voice the power to be heard, whether you agree with them or not. Which, in a day where communities are tearing down statues which honored their past as though a community could no longer learn as a whole, I find this very important. Aside from the disgraceful tour it brought to you courtesy of Window Lickers R Us, otherwise known as Ghost City Tours, each tour, whether it was Hocus Pocus or a ghost tour, was beautifully balanced in order to give you an insight into the life of Salem, the history of the area, and the relevance as to why it's prominent today. The Ropes Mansion, for example, used in the filming of Disney's 1993 Hocus Pocus, seen here, which was not only used as a museum, but a beautifully curated community garden, is a great example of Salem honoring its history, catering to pop culture fans, and providing a rich resource for the community. Just be careful of that Kentucky yellowwood tree, which in the season that we were, was full of carpenter bees. I have to say that while Salem as a port city feels strangely familiar to the city I currently live in, as well as a town I grew up in as a small child, it is far more welcoming and accepting of other faiths, cultures, and lifestyles than many other places I've visited. With Massachusetts being the first state to legalize gay marriage, as well as legalizing recreational marijuana, this is not the same place many may have visited when they were, let's say, in high school. Rainbow flags fly 365 days a year. Crosswalks supporting those values cross roads with ease, and yes, a drag show in the square, which I found thoroughly enjoyable, is apparently a common occurrence. Pagans of all different paths have a variety of shops to visit, and those who may not even walk those ways will also find accommodating shopping and adventures. Salem is a very dog-friendly town as well, with several shops and restaurants available for you and your pup to peruse. I have to add this one caveat before moving on to Boston. We went in June. The crowds were light and people watching was still plentiful. It very much felt like Cedarburg in the middle of the week. To be noted, however, I would not recommend doing Salem in October when the crowds become Disney-sized, and getting anything done, including just getting a meal, can be daunting. However, if you are just going to people watch and not partake in shopping, museums, tours, or dining, you may find Salem in October a delightful distraction from the norm. Moving on to Boston. So well known from the arts to sports, with long, deep roots in the founding of the country, Boston rolls out their carpet for visitors daily. Because we only had been in town for one day, we chose to do the trolley tour, hitting major sites like the Charlestown Navy Yard, where we got to see the USS Constitution and the USS Cassian Young. After a short walk, we could look over Boston from the top of Breeds Hill, where the misnamed Battle of Bunker Hill took place. There was just too much to see in Boston to get it in all in one day, let alone 10 minutes. We of course stopped at Cheers, which fans of the 80s TV show will remember from their childhood. And while the show set is upstairs, the real bar is downstairs. I found it amusing that this bar is a little bit bigger than the much recognized Sir James pub in Port Washington. There is of course a gift shop where you could buy glasses, mugs, and the like. However, I was particularly taken with the atmosphere, which, much like Disney, where everyone treated everybody like they had been friends for years, with complete strangers picking up conversations as though they were just catching up on old times. From there it was on to our nightly ghost tour, this one hosted by Ghost and Gravestones, and it did not disappoint.
You're scaring us to death with your goblin stories. So I go, excuse me, sir, these are ghost stories. It did not diffuse the situation. All right, this part of the tour features both a ghost and a gravestone. This rather unique headstone is a triple headstone belonging to the Worthylake family. George Worthylake, his wife Anne, and their daughter Ruth. George Worthylake was the first lighthouse keeper at Boston Light. Boston Light, built on Little Brewster Island in 1716, was the first lighthouse here in America. They were barely there 18 months when tragedy befell. George, his wife, and youngest daughter were returning from a day trip in Boston picking up supplies. When their vessel got within 25 feet of the island, it capsized, and they all perished. At first, the locals thought, well, that island, it must be cursed. George was a sailor and a champion swimmer. How could this have happened? The second lighthouse keeper, Captain Robert Saunders. Within a fortnight, he and his two mates were found washed ashore harborside, dead. No one knows why. The third lighthouse keeper. He lived to tell the tale, but his tale involved watching the lighthouse go up in flames, mysteriously. Of course, the lighthouse has been rebuilt. It's currently operated by the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard keep very accurate records of all the going-ons. And in their ledger, they have one column dedicated to one unique manifestation. And when this unique manifestation occurs, they are bound to write in the ledger the letters OG. OG. Again and again in the ledger. OG. Old George. Yes, the ghost of George Worthylake himself. Seen on numerous occasions, ascending the exterior circular staircase of the lighthouse. Lantern in hand, he gets about 3/4 to the top, and then stops and gazes out at the point where he perished. Dramatic pause.
Awesome.
All right, next stop.
In case you're wondering, as I had completely forgotten, the Spite House is in Boston as well. If you're not familiar with the story, pause the video and go look it up, and you will understand why its presence granted me a smile for the rest of the evening.
Now we're going to recite a poem. I'm going to start and see if you can finish the end of it. Ready? Good. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of...
Paul Revere.
Yes, you won! And this is Paul Revere's monument. But it is not where he was originally buried. He was originally buried beneath this puny, modest headstone. For those of you who can't see it, it is quite small. You see, Paul wasn't quite as famous as he is now when he passed. He didn't garner that level of fame until that lovely little poem we just recited, Monument, and the world's first tourist trap. This is one of the most photographed stones in the entire city. So please, snap a photo. But beware, for you may capture more than you bargained for. Not too long ago, a man was standing right about where you are now. Yes, you in the cap. He lifted his camera to snap a photo of this very monument when some rude person stepped in front of it and ruined his shot like I did to most of you just now. So he looked up from his viewfinder to give this jackwagon a piece of his mind. But there was no one there. There was no one within 100 yards of him. So he did what any of you would have done. He snapped one more photo and then ran like a bat out of hell right out of this burying ground. But he didn't let that incident ruin his vacation. No, no, no. He practically forgot about it until he went home and got that film developed. There in the picture was the blurry image of two stocking-clad legs in front of this very monument. Whose disembodied stocking-clad legs were they? Some people say they belong to Paul Revere, but I think that's a load of rubbish. I mean, during Paul Revere's life, he had 2 wives, 16 jobs, and nearly as many children. No, 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 no. I think that when he died, he took the opportunity to finally rest in peace. I believe those legs belong to Dr. Joseph Warren. Does anyone know who Dr. Joseph Warren is? Oh, you do you? All right, well, we'll talk about him in a moment, but I'm going to give you another little piece of trivia. Did anyone here know that Paul Revere dug up dead bodies? Well, he did. But he didn't do it for fun or profit like I might. He did it to find the remains of a dear friend, Dr. Joseph Warren. Now, Dr. Joseph Warren played a large role in the Revolution and was the man who enlisted Paul Revere and William Dawes for that midnight ride. Some people even say that he could have become the first president of what would be the United States of America if he had not died during the Battle of Bunker Hill. Rather than exercising his ranking as a major general, Dr. Warren chose to fight alongside his men as a private on the front lines. He nearly made it through the entire battle, until he was shot in the head by a British officer who recognized him. They threw Dr. Warren's body into a makeshift pit, and then other redcoats threw the bodies of more colonial militiamen on top of him. They left these men there, buried, unmarked, let them rot like the rebels they were. Paul Revere during this time was in hiding after his midnight ride, so he didn't hear of his dear friend's mistreatment until months later. But once he did hear, he was not pleased. So with several of his close companions, he traveled to Charlestown to find Dr. Warren's remains in that mass grave. But keep in mind, it had been nearly 10 months since the Battle of Bunker Hill, so this mass grave had become a soup of decomposition, with ooh and goo and maggots feeding off of all of it. Yet these determined men trudged on as bones snapped beneath their feet. After hours hours of digging in the dark, Paul Revere came across a corpse wearing a blue coat he thought he recognized. He waded through the dead bodies to come to this corpse. And once he had, he picked up the skull and pried it open to look inside the mouth. Then he exclaimed to his companions, "This is he! This is Dr. Warren! I recognize my work!" As I said, Paul Revere had many jobs. He was a bell ringer, a bellcaster, a coppersmith, a quarry smith, a courier, and the best darn dentist in Boston town. He even did some of my work. Nice, huh? Well, he had wired a pair of porcelain teeth into the mouth of Dr. Warren only 2 weeks before the Battle of Bunker Hill. And now, as he looked into the mouth of this corpse, he was able to recognize his own handiwork and positively identify that those remains did belong to Dr. Warren. Dr. Warren's body was brought back here to be buried. Although, I don't believe he's able to rest in peace. I believe Dr. Warren comes here, night after night, to say thanks to Paul for finding his body, giving him a proper burial, and being his dentist. So, I think we can all agree that those legs must have belonged to Dr. Warren. And I also think we can all agree that we should move because we're right where Dr. Warren likes to be. Come on, we're in his way. Come on, let's go.
There was so much to do in Boston that we actually only scratched the surface. And if you're going to spend the day in the Cradle of Liberty, definitely take in the trolley tour, as you will get through as much as you can in Boston. But with time quickly running out, we got back to the airport and headed back to Milwaukee. Boston's rainy and overcast skies wishing us safe travels and come again. Yes, I think we will. Because we had a great time.